So within the last couple of weeks to the last couple of months, a very strange thing has started to happen with Google Ads. And you might have kind of seen the side effects of this as a result, which is your Google Ads sales dropping. Now, the easy answer to this question is just because what's happening right now in the world, that's why all of the sales are dropping. But is the answer really that simple? Now, personally, after looking at multiple different ad accounts like the one right here on my screen, and just taking a look at the last 7 days and comparing it to the previous time period, I can see the same thing happening with this ad account, which by the way is a client's e-commerce brand, which I haven't really started working with yet, but we are in the progress of. But I do have currently access to this ad account under my Google Ads agency, Your Marketing. Just within the last 7 days, we can see conversion value for this brand has dropped 21%, while the overall clicks have dropped 15%, the conversion rate has dropped, even the conversions have dropped by 25%, and of course, everything else has followed, which means this brand is not doing so well. It has dropped in ROAS as well. Everything is on the way downwards. But that's not the only brand. If we look at this brand right here, go on over to the campaign section and just change it to the last 7 days, look at the previous time period in terms of the comparison, we can see something very similar happening. Now, with certain brands like these, the conversion rates are actually off, the conversion tracking isn't fully correct, which is why it says there's a 55% increase. However, the reality is that this brand also is facing a lower amount in terms of the overall revenue when you take a closer look at the Shopify side of things and at the actual dashboard. Looking at this next brand right here, same thing is happening. In the last 14 days, we can see that the ROAS has actually went up just a little bit again. Now in the last 14 days, we can see all of these brands right here, which are also brands I'm handling under my Google Ads agency, Your Marketing, besides the top one and maybe the second one even, where I'm just working with it right now and scaling these brands up. Overall, majority of them are in a downward spiral. That's just the reality, including this brand right here. If we go on over to the campaign side of things, just look at the last 7 days and look at the overall cost has increased, and even the ROAS for this brand has increased. However, if we look at the total number of conversions, we can see that there is an increase in the ROAS. The kind of sacrifice we're having to make is with the overall conversions. And the main reason why the ROAS is even at this level right now is just because of some safety measures we're doing, where we're actually adding a ROAS target within the Performance Max campaign to ensure it just doesn't go too crazy. But now coming to the main question as to why this is actually happening and what's going on in the world. So going back a little bit to what I mentioned earlier, due to economic conditions, this is one of the main reasons, especially when it depends on when you're watching this video. But if you're watching this video right now, you need to look at this chart, which I also covered in one of my last videos, where the overall trend line for the amount of sales, retail sales specifically, done since the beginning of 2013 all the way up to now, we can see that there was a big spike upwards in Q1 of 2020, but then 2021, 2022, things are on a downward spiral. This is just the reality of e-commerce right now, especially with Google Ads. One of the main contributing reasons why so many of these e-commerce brands, their sales are just starting to go down over this time period. If you can look at the time range right here, in the beginning of July, things weren't that great as well. But if we now take a look at the weekly time period and kind of change the time range from just the last 30 days to maybe a few months in the past, so from April, we can see exactly what has started to happen. So while the ROAS, it has fluctuated up and down on certain months, overall since this time period of June, it has really started to go down, as you can see right here. And the cost, of course, with the ROAS dipping down, there is no reason to spend more money, so the cost also has started to be on the lower end of the spectrum. And again, the main reason why this is happening depends on, again, when you're watching this video, is economic conditions. So whatever is happening in the economy, unfortunately, directly impacts your Google Ads results. That's just how things work. There is really nothing you can do to kind of, besides adjust accordingly. Maybe you have been trying to kind of lower the ad spend. Maybe you have been setting some targets on your smart shopping, or in this case, Performance Max campaigns, or you're just trying to cut your costs, trying to cut your expenses. But that is one of the main reasons why your Google Ads sales are probably dropping. And as I mentioned, in terms of what to do in this situation, there's very limited things you can do, but what you can do on your end is, of course, continue sourcing more products. The more kind of variations and the more kind of styles you offer to your customers, the better the chances of you finding more winning products during a difficult time like this. But another thing you can do is just kind of cut your expenses on the bad campaigns. Whatever isn't working, just shut it off. Also have more campaign types running and lower your ad spend on the bad campaign types, but also lower your expenses in general. If this is one of the reasons why you personally think your ad account is having an issue with sales, it's dropping, then you should definitely implement those techniques one at a time, of course. But that's not the only main reason why your Google Ad sales might be dropping. The second thing is, which is kind of more on your end of the spectrum, it's just new competitors have entered the market. So for example, if we do a quick search for the keyword 3D printer, and let's assume you were the first option right here selling your 3D printer for $800, and everything was going fine and dandy for the longest time ever, because maybe you had only a few competitors when you started selling your product and when it became a winning product, like maybe Best Buy, Quill right here, maybe even Amazon. But as you started to notice more and more in the later portion of the time period when your sales started to drop, other competitors might have just come into the market which you are unaware of. So for example, in this case, maybe Amazon entered the market where it's selling something very similar to you but at a fraction of the cost. So now just when your customers see this, when they see you compared to your competitor and they're at a much lower pricing than you, obviously you're gonna lose some of your customers, and in this case might be a big portion depending on how significant of a price cut your new competitor did. So one thing that causes a lot of e-commerce brands to just kind of dwindle down in their Google Ad sales is new competitors enter the market, they start these price wars, which by the way, I do not recommend you do, and whoever is doing, they're just kind of hammering their own toes, because eventually these price wars are going to catch up to them and they're not going to be able to sell their product at that price, because another competitor of you guys might come in and start their own price war, might start selling it for a much lower price. So this kind of is an ongoing thing that just happens. But if you notice your Google Ad sales suddenly nothing really changed in the back end, or something you did just starting to go down in terms of sales, it's most likely due to a new competitor entering the market, stealing your impression share, and just kind of doing a price war. One easy way also to look at this is if you start to notice within your overall listing that your impression share is also starting to drop. So for example, if we go on over to columns, if we go on to the competitive metrics section, we need to look at search impression share, we need to look at search lost IS rank, and we need to also look at the click share right here. Just click apply, and what you can see is within the last 7 days, last 14 days, whatever time period you're looking at, just kind of checking that time period, you will be able to see that your impression shares across the board are actually dropping. So that is kind of a great indicator that things are really not looking too good. So for example, search impression share here has increased, search lost IS rank has decreased, which means this brand is doing good in terms of search impression share. The impression share actually increased, but the click share here has actually started to decrease. So even though they're getting the same number of impressions, less number of people are actually clicking on this brand's ads, which means maybe there's new competitors here which the customers are actually looking at. The customers are clicking on their ads more than on this customer's ads, or maybe just in general, people are doing more window shopping. They are still searching, but they're not necessarily clicking on ads, they're not necessarily buying. So this is a great indicator that maybe the search demand for this product has decreased, or just new competitors have again entered the market. So you need to kind of keep a good look out on your new competitors, see who's in the market, see who's not in the market and what they're doing, and then base your kind of strategies around that. So in this case, if you do see new competitors come into the market, one easy way to again would be to start a price war with that competitor, which is something I don't recommend. So instead, keep your prices the same, find better ways to stand out, maybe a different image, maybe a different style of the product, add more products even. That's another great way to stand out of the market. But the third main reason why your Google Ad sales are probably dropping is just because there's a lowering demand for your product. And trust me, this really happens for those seasonal products. If you're selling, for example, heaters during the summertime, obviously there's going to come a time period when your demand just starts to drop. And one easy way to kind of look into this, to kind of figure this out, is just go on over to the keyword planner tool and just type in the main keyword for the product you're trying to sell. So for example, in this case, if we type in heater, press enter, we can see what goes on during that time period. So obviously there's a big time range when things start to go up, everybody's happy, everybody's making money, people are throwing parties because they're becoming so rich from e-commerce, and all of a sudden the demand starts to go down, and this is when people start to panic. E-commerce store owners start to kind of make those panicky decisions, they start to cut their costs, all of that stuff. But in reality, it's just because there's a lowering demand during this time period. There's very little you can do to battle this besides just go with the flow, maybe offer other kinds of products during this time period which can kind of relate to the season when, and capture those sales when the season is in the upward trend for another type of product. But again, this is a type of product where if there's just lowering demand, there's very little you can do. But again, one of the easiest techniques to kind of deal with this is just to add more products which have a higher demand or a very stable straight line demand during this time period. There's a bunch of products out there which can kind of fit this criteria, and you will need to do a little bit of extra work if you don't want your e-commerce brand to just go down the toilet, which is something I really recommend you do. Just do a little bit of keyword research. I have videos on that, on how to do proper keyword research, and just look at at what is out there, what is trending right now, which can be better suitable for your brand during this time period. But the next kind of thing that comes to mind as to why your Google Ad sales might be dropping is just because maybe you made a very significant change. Now, this is something we were actually dealing with one of the e-commerce brands we were currently handling, where one of the team members made a change on the account, which is they just excluded a bunch of products which did not meet the criteria. And this is, by the way, why I always say wait about 7 to 14 days before making those big significant changes, because otherwise if you make too big of a change, then it's just gonna make the campaign go down the wrong rabbit hole. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened here. Even though we were waiting the certain time period and what was basically just doing all of the proper techniques, which I always mention within my videos, things just kind of took a turn for the worse after a certain time period. So if we go ahead and look at it at a bigger time period, we can see that after a certain time range of this change right here, which was made, and also this one right here, things just kind of became very stagnant. Nothing was really happening, and sales basically plummeted all the way to zero. And if we look at the changes done here, those changes were mostly just excluding a bunch of products. So one thing you want to kind of understand is when you exclude a bunch of products, Google needs to re-optimize for the new set of products that you currently have within that campaign, because now those products might have not been getting that ad budget before, but now it is certainly getting that ad spend, and those old products which were getting majority of the ad spend just all of a sudden went to zero. So this is kind of a big change. It makes Google panic significantly. So for a week, 2-week time period, this is when you might notice that the sales are just not coming in no matter what you do. So whenever you make a change, you have to make sure you're trying to monitoring the change, making sure it's not too big of a change. And it doesn't matter if it's a change on your Google ad side of things or it's a change on your back end, meaning your actual Shopify store or your WooCommerce or whatever it is. You change something on the website, really monitor your results, make sure you know exactly what you did, because if you don't know what you did, then it's going to be very hard for you to kind of pinpoint exactly what was the reason why your e-commerce brand sales started to plummet, why your Google ad sales are not there. But those are pretty much the only real reasons as to why your Google ad sales might be dropping as of right now, and the main things that you can do for your e-commerce brand, for your Google ads account, so that you can get back on track. Because do things right in this critical time period and you will be back on track in no time, but do it wrong, you will end up being in a very unfortunate situation where no matter what you do, things are just not working. But if you're currently doing $30,000 or more with your e-commerce brand, you need a little bit of extra help scaling your e-commerce brand to the next level, go onto my website at yourmarketing.com and book a free call with me to see how we can possibly work together and make that happen. But if you found any type of value in this video, destroy that like button, destroy that subscribe button, and I will see you in my next video.